Now we want to look at wheat production in Sudan. Yes, you heard me, because our obligation is also to set the pace and tell the story in our continent. The African Development Bank has embarked on an emergency project to strengthen wheat production in Sudan. And according to reports, this has helped to strengthen the production of wheat locally to the tune of about 70 billion naira. What has been the impact of this investment? What are the challenges? And what should be done to ensure that the essence of this project is being achieved? We're being joined by our in-house analyst, Chooks, who is joining us in this conversation to shed more light. Glad to have you join us, Chooks.
Thank you very much, Femi. It's nice to be on Early Exchange.
It's like we're putting you on the hot spot.
Well, there is nothing hotter than being in Sudan right now.
Oh, yeah, that's it, and which is why this conversation is crucial. Now, let's look at this project. The African Development Bank, in its wisdom, has decided to choose Sudan for this project, which is called what we call emergency kind of intervention, to ensure that the production of wheat is being sustained in this country. What do you make of this kind of investment, and why do you think Sudan is of interest to African Development Bank?
Well, I like the word you used, emergency. So let's hold on to that because it's an emergency. And I won't use the other word you choose. Sudan right now is in crisis. They're in a major hunger crisis, thanks to conflicts, thanks to wars that have refused to end. I really don't know why you don't want to talk about that, but it's a shame on African leaders. Let's get to that. For a country who wheat is their major cash crop, unfortunately, they eat everything they produce when it comes to wheat, but that is the major thing they produce. You get to be surprised that their climate happens to be hot, yet they can't produce wheat in that particular place. And over years, they've been able to modify their seeds to be weather resistant,
heat resistant,
and
they have that special kind of wheat
exactly. From 2012 to 2020, they've been able to double down on their wheat production, move from 22% of what they consume, which they produce and consume, down to 50%. Then come war. Now they need help.
Now, let me make reference to what the director of the bank director said as regards this project. I'll read it to you and I'll love you to react to it, talking about the importance of this project and the timing. This development comes at a crucial time for Sudan, which is facing a looming hunger due to the ongoing conflict that has slowed down production in the past agric season. Now, we're talking about the timing for this project. In the last 2 years, AFDB has been investing in this project to be able to ensure that wheat production is sustained. Now, looking at the timing, we know they're battling with the issue of hunger, which is typical of what is happening in most African countries now. How do you think Sudan can take advantage of this to maximize gains from this project, knowing fully well that it might not last longer, but in the last 2 years, they've been beneficiary? What can Sudan do to ensure that the output or the gains being recorded as regards this project is being sustained?
What can Sudan do is very relative. What can Sudan not do is also very relative. Now, the project is happening in 5 major states.
Yeah, across.
Now, 3 of them are, the conflict is not much there. 2, the conflict is a bit much. Now, 100% of the fund, $70 to $75 million, is going to around 170,000 smallholder farmers. They are giving them seedlings and they are giving them fertilizer. Now, the issue is this: no matter what you put on ground, if there is no safety to go to the farm, it's useless. For this intervention, this is majorly to stop people from dying of hunger. That is where Sudan is right now. And for this to have worked in the last 1 year, we want to say thank you. You know that kind of thing when you look up and say there's a God somewhere. Thank you. Sudan have had their first share, I would say fair, their worst share of things in the last decade, from drought to famine to war to internal conflict. You now ask who did Sudan offend? From a full country they split. now even decide that you think it's okay, we split because those are part of it, they are now in conflict again. 42 point something million people, and their major staple is at risk. They have more internally displaced people than any other country on that side of our continent. And the good thing about what ADP is doing, they've been part of Sudan's progress for a very long time. The major heat-resistant wheat in the first place, they contributed a larger sum in production, in research. Then the World Food Program are the people that are particularly initiating and on ground to get this project done. Now, we'll say kudos to them. It's a 2-year project, but that 2 year needs to go beyond 2 years. If the people are dead, then of what use is the bank? It's an African Development Bank. Yes, they are doing their bit, but are we appeal that it should go beyond 2 years? And for the World Food Program is an international organization. We want to see an extent where we have African organizations take over what World Food Program is doing. If an African bank is sponsoring it, that ownership should be there, majorly from Sudan and its neighbors. That way, we will have that responsibility to keep this project going. And if we can talk within ourselves, if it's agriculture that can make us talk to ourselves, then we can say that we can start bringing warring parties to talk to themselves. The amount of displacement is way too much. Then that brings us back to what is causing the issue in the first place. African leaders should stop whoever using Africa as a theater for proxy wars.
All right. Talking about, African leaders should set the narrative, which talks about leadership. Now, let's talk about AFDB now investing about $75 million into this project. Are you really not bothered or concerned? Because when you talk about projects or money being allocated for a project like this, are you not concerned about the corruption element and the fact that instances like this usually have middlemen, people whose interest might not be in the interest of the nation? Are you not worried that this money might not actually get to the real farmers? There's this cliche about political farmers taking charge. Are you not bothered this might happen? Knowing fully well you are in an environment where there's insecurity, there seems not to be a resemblance of order.
Okay. The good thing is that the people in charge at the helms of affairs for African Development Bank, we know them. They are people that are not just responsible, but we know their pedigree, where they're coming from. They had to fight to stay there because some people and some powers, you know yourself, they didn't want them to be there. And they are doing good. Now, for what World Food Program have done is they've been able to identify, okay, we are not giving you money. It will get into the wrong hands. We are not giving you mass production of wheat or mass production of seeds or mass production of a warehouse of fertilizer. No, it also gets into the wrong hands. They can use it for something else. They identified the farmers, the small farmers, and gave it to them directly. So if they have 170,000 farmers and they are catering for that 170,000 farmers, they are expecting a production from those numbers that they've given these seedlings and fertilizer to. That way, you have your data. That way, you are very, very specific when it comes to this is where we are going to. This is where our fund is going to go to. Now, for the issue where we are going to have some question mark is this. Now, the World Food Program itself also has an administration. They also have NGOs that work with them. So part of that money is also going to service these people. So we now look at what percentage of it at the long run is getting to the person that is going to get to the farm.
My worry, which is why I'm asking these questions, that most of these farmers are displaced, from their natural habitat. Some of them won't be able to access their farms.
A lot of them are in IDP camps.
In IDP camps. And then if these resources do not get to them, so will it not defeat the purpose of this kind of program? Because that's my question. That's my worry, that if this kind of situation exists whereby the people who actually need these products don't get it, what can be done to ensure that this gap is being bridged? Because that's quite crucial.
Okay, this is 1 year down the line, and they've been able to come out and say, okay, this is what we dropped, this is what we've gotten. So that question mark is not there yet. Can it be there? Yes. Did they see it and not say it? Yes. But now that will take some investigation to find out. But the route they've gone in looking for who exactly is the farmer, and let's give this farmer the seed and the fertilizer or any other assistance that might come through extension workers, machinery, or so. Good, that works instead of monetary value. Now, we can't keep looking at our fears and not run. If a bird is singing for the rain, be sure that the rain will be the rain will be the bird. So let's leave the fears and get to see what at the end of the day is the farmer producing. And for them to have gotten up to 70% addition, now they did about 20-something% of local consumption in addition to what they had before. That is some progress. Now we are looking for ability to scale up, but also to scale up will require more farmers, more land. Now, where is the land? You have to make sure people don't get into conflict zones. And, with the issue of conflict comes the issue of landmines. How safe is the person going out there to avoid stepping on things that will either hurt, kill, or maim the person?
Now, if you look at wheat production in Sudan, according to statistics, about 3.2 million metric tons, are being consumed annually, or more than 3.2 million metric tons. And they have one special variety of wheat, which is heat resistant. Now, how can other African countries take advantage of this, I call it gift of nature that you have in Sudan, to help maximize economic growth in Sudan? You will discover that most African countries depend on wheat from Russia. You are aware of this Bahrain D and all that. In most African countries, shouldn't be this an option for African countries rather than depending on the one from Russia, knowing fully well that there's disruption even in the global chain from the one coming from Russia?
Okay, you mentioned Russia, you're being fair and you're being nice. You didn't mention war torn Ukraine.
Yeah.
So you're just being nice to make it look like, okay. But the sad part of it is that countries like Nigeria, over 12, 14 states in Nigeria can produce wheat. They have lands that can produce wheat. So if Nigeria can, other countries across West Africa also can. Then now see Sudan and see the seedlings that they are able to plant in their own place and it will grow. Now, this now brings us to the question of narrative. What have we been told over time that is not true? Let's take an example. There is this country that they had a military takeover some few years back, not far from us. And they told them that certain things cannot grow in their country. Only for the young military man to tell these people, go and plant this and he's planting. Now he's going around primary schools and telling the primary school children that what they told us in the last 60 years is a lie. It's all about control. Narrative. Who controls the narrative controls the economy. If they tell you this can't grow in your place, you come to us for the service. And we've had leadership, that have not decided to get sense. When I get it like get sense.
When you get sense figuratively, knowing what to do as regards having the right political will to make some hard decisions.
Thank you very much.
Okay, because we have to situate it well. We're on a national TV.
We are on national TV. They said to him, brain is given, sense is required. So we have gotten to that place where Africa needs to start cutting down on the money we send out and start looking for the money we bring in. Why should we buy something we can cultivate here in Africa? And that's why I give the African Development Bank a whole lot of kudos. If Sudan is able to feed themselves 50%, they will avert hunger, serious hunger catastrophe that is looming over that nation. And there is nothing as worse as, okay, now they are internally displaced. What when they now say, okay, now let's leave, and all everybody is heading to Europe? Do they have the space to accommodate them? So let the people take care of them. Let them deal with their internal issues. If they can keep cultivating, then good and fine. Now, African leaders, this is to our shame. This is to our shame. Now, let's look at Sudan. If Sudan can grow the wheat, why can't others? If Ukraine can send you wheat that they are not using because half of their population have left the country.
And that's a country is battling with war and some other.
They're not battling, they are in it. They are right in it.
All right, let's look at the place of leadership and governance here. You are aware of what's happening in Sudan, and for years the crisis has been on. What would you expect the African Union to do in this situation? What kind of intervention would you expect for it to happen? And you also observe that most of the time, the issue or the crisis in Sudan is largely not covered or not being discussed when it comes to global space, giving the right attention that be given to what is playing out in Sudan. What can be done differently to draw attention to this?
It's intentional. It's 100% intentional. It's happening in Africa.
Why do you think it's intentional?
Okay. Let's look at what happened in Ukraine. Before the first gunshot was fired in Ukraine, we had that in the news for well over 2 weeks. There was a build-up, there was a follow-up. They put it in our face. They said it every day before the first tank rolled into Ukraine.
Isn't that
till tomorrow?
That should be the role of the media.
That should be the role of the media. Good. Then now, who is controlling that narrative? That is where the issue is. Now, we have decided to keep quiet and let the West control that narrative. So it's not going to augur well for us. We almost got into a conflict in neighboring Niger because some parties decided that other African countries should go there and invade Niger. I will look up to heaven and say, God, thank you. Because the powers within this space used time and said, we are not going there. And time sorted that issue out. It's the same thing. African leaders should stand up and walk into Sudan and tell the people that are warring, because I can tell you 100%, Sudan is not the issue. That war is coming from outside. Sudan is just a proxy. You can't tell me West Africa walk into Sudan and they'll fight. It's not possible. How many are they?
All right, let's look at wheat production in Nigeria, looking at the example of what the African Development Bank has done in Sudan. Let me bring this dimension to it, even though it might look like, why are you going this route? You have the AFDB, president to be a Nigerian, and then we are having issue of wheat production in Nigeria. What do you think can be done for us to also replicate what is happening in Sudan now? We have AFDB financing. We understand because of the sensitivity of the hunger in Sudan. But for Nigeria, in financing our wheat production and, improving wheat production in Nigeria, how can we take advantage of the disruption in the supply chain?
Okay. Now, let's look at what the president of the AFDB Bank, who happens to be a gentleman and a good fellow. Sometime last year, if you remember very well, there was a project for financing of agriculture in every local government. It came from African Development Bank. We now ask ourselves, what happened to it? Where are we at this point in time? There is an extent to which you as a bank can come in and push a project in a given country. There is an extent. No matter what your push, what your drive, what your passion is, if the political will is not there, it won't happen. Worst of, you will bring the fund and it will be diverted to something else. And you will have to get that fund back. So aside African Development Bank, yes, we might have a lot share in African Development Bank, but it still does not belong to Nigeria. Now, Sudan is getting that because over time, they've been open to work with African Development Bank when it comes to wheat production. This is where other countries should emulate, copy, and get these things done. And to Nigeria, I find it difficult to say this. Why are we always in the middle of the river and yet we can't wash the soap off our eyes? In the midst of a whole lot of plenty, yet we just can't scoop.
All right. Now, let's talk about some of the challenges that could trade this kind of projects. You talked about the issue of data earlier. It's been a challenging thing, when it comes to this climb, the reliability of the data, even the availability in the first place. Now, we're talking about Sudan, where there seems to be no proper order as regards the local production of these things until AFDB came into question. As regards the data on the farmers who are going to benefit from this project, are you not bothered that you might not likely have the right data to drive this kind of project? And what would you expect the AFDB to do in this regard to improve that? Because you also need to do what we'll call assessment of this report to see the level of performance. But that cannot be done when you don't have the right data, the right research, with the use of extension workers who should ensure that this project succeeds. How challenging could that be for this kind of project?
Yeah, how challenging could that be is an African Development Bank problem. But since I'm African and I want them to succeed, now, for now, they have given us a direct data that 170,000 farmers, smallholder farmers, subsistence farmers, are involved in this project. Now, I'm looking up to, before we add more number to that particular 170,000, let's see what can we do for this 170,000 to do 2 times what they did last year. So if they can produce 2 times or even 1.5 what they did last year, they will now say, okay, good. Can this 170 that have done this before, can they teach one person? We don't need to go start reinventing the wheel or giving ourselves stress of adding news. Just tell, okay, Abu, you did it last year. Abu, can you bring in Shehu? Just only Shehu. And teach Shehu what you did. And let Shehu learn the ropes from you. So if 170 can train another 170, one teach one mentor one, it turns to 340. So imagine what that number will do in 5, 6, 10 years. That way, African Development Bank knows that, okay, our problem in consulting is going to be very reduced. We wouldn't need a second party to go out there and be sourcing for any form of additional NGOs to recruit, teach. No. The people we have on ground that we've taught, mentored, and they've done this successfully can now be the ones to say, okay, pick one person and replicate what you did. Then over the years, one person replicates. Before we know what is happening, we've had over 1.6, 1.10 million people doing exactly the same thing. Now, if before the war got serious, they could feed 100% of what they were producing, they consumed in the first place and imported more. So imagine if this growth of 170 does times 10. They'll be able to produce all they need and still have excess to export to countries like Nigeria that have decided to sleep.
Now, for this project to achieve the purpose intended, now let's look at the roles of stakeholders. We're going to start with the community leaders. For this kind of project to even see the light of the day, it takes the collaboration of the locals. What would you expect community leaders? Let's even leave the role of the government, which is what we've talked about earlier. Now, let's localize this conversation and talk about the role of the locals, the community leaders, the farmers associations, and even the farmers. What should be their responsibilities to ensure that this project achieve the purpose intended?
We have a certain Dr. Dahusa who always talks about opportunity cost. Let me go back to his analogy,
which is a universal law anyway.
Yes, but in his own lines. Now, for the community leaders, I will call them gatekeepers. For the locals, the chiefs and the farmers, it's 2 ways. Either you take up this project, or we give you $75 million, spend it how you want, import how you want. By the time that money is gone, you die of hunger. So they have seen what the end looks like, and they've seen what this can do. It's better I farm here, I produce here, I feed my family first, because what you produce, you feed, before you can even sell to get some other things. So now they've chosen a better option and not depending on when is not World Food Program, it will now be Food Association of Nigeria, Food Organization that will now come and distribute free food when it gets to the worst part of it. So they've seen that this is better, and they have followed suit, and they are doing well. Now, there's a particular people you didn't mention, the young men in those communities.
Yeah.
Because they are also part of the security, securing the farmers and making sure that they get the plants, cultivate, harvest, and all that. And that entire chain have worked assiduously to this particular point. Now they need to double down. This war will end. When this war is over, those that are in IDP that are part of this program, they will have to earn a living. And this is more like a leeway of saying, this is possible. If I could cultivate in this particular state, I can double down beyond this state and be a producer of this product which happens to be a national earner. So if everyone should collaborate and keep doing well, if the war ends, better off for them.
All right, interesting. Let's look at this dimension to it. You observe that most farmers in Africa, they are largely illiterate or uneducated, and most of them are peasants.
When you say illiterate and uneducated, we need to define illiterate, uneducated.
I'm talking about when it comes to the modern techniques as regards agriculture. Some of them might.
Whose technique exactly?
No, what I'm trying to say is you're aware of the farmers in your village.
They are not illiterate, they are educated.
When it comes to technology, as far as the modern technology expected in farming, mechanized farming, they are disadvantaged. That's what I'm trying to portray. Okay. So now if we look at the picture as regards to there now with this kind of project, what kind of intervention would you expect also from the AFDB as regards orientation, as regards the use of technology to ensure that this project, because if you're asking for Sudan to double its production, it has to be mechanized and even commercialized. But these local farmers don't have that capacity. So what kind of intervention, orientation, or the kind of template would you expect the AFDB to deploy in this area for these locals to be armed with the right skills, with the right technology to be able to deliver on this project?
Okay, for now, they have all they need. Let's look at the now. The now is feed yourself. That's for the now.
No, I'm saying beyond now. Beyond, take the narrative beyond just feeding.
Now, beyond now they have to be able to feed yourself and sell. Then they have to be able to feed yourself.
For 2 years now.
So, right
I'm looking at the narrative to take it further.
Okay, now. Further, feed yourself, then sell. Then further, feed yourself, sell, export. Now, for that to happen, that means the hectares they are cultivating has to increase. And that means mechanized farming has to come in. But for that to also happen, the war needs to stop. You can't go beyond the safe land to go and cultivate. Knowing fully well that if you cultivate, you might be cultivating for some other people. Or you might go there, cultivate, and you come back. So the war needs to end. Then we'll have more lands to cultivate. Then machineries can start coming in, which I know the ADB has that in their plan, definitely. For them to have done that before 2012, 2018, they can still do it again. And it's now left for the people use this particular trial period and start learning those techniques for mass production. And not just producing with, getting also involved in the value chain is also something that they should also look at. Whereby at the end of the day, they're not just pushing raw primary product beyond the borders of Sudan. I really wish them the best, but first I want them to survive.
All right. Chooks, I think we just have to leave the narrative here. We must thank you for your time and your submission. As a concerned African and someone who has been following the development in Sudan and largely in the continent, we must appreciate you for your time. Like my friend will always say, I must say you're doing well.
Thank you very much, brother. It's my pleasure.
All right, this is where we'll call it a wrap. Don't forget the conversation continues on our social media platform. In case you're wondering where it's Blessing, today is a special day. I want to wish her a special a celebration. She left somehow to prepare for the special celebration. You know, there's something happening after now. And if you need to find out, just get across to Blessing. It's a special day. On behalf of the crew and on behalf of Soup Management, I want to say happy birthday to the First Lady of Early Exchange. And don't forget, Early Exchange will always return bigger and better, and the conversation continues on our social media platform at Soup News TV. I am Femi Ayodele. I'll see you tomorrow.
Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.